Well, hey everybody, and welcome to the Durango Vineyard. Man, our world is changing quickly, isn't it? And it's almost like COVID is releasing its grip. I gotta tell you, we are thrilled to announce that we're doing an Easter service at Tico time. It's right at the state line between the Colorado and New Mexico border on 550, and we're doing it as close to festival style as we can. We've got things for kids, a big barbecue, and a great service starting at 11 o'clock. I hope not only you can come with your family, but I hope you can invite a few people to join us. And a lot of the way forward to the Vineyard is back to inviting people in. This is a great opportunity to start dipping our feet in those waters. So this week we're starting a new series, or continuing from last week, this idea on Your Kingdom Come. And it's a specific look at the Sermon on the Mount. And this week we're going to talk about anger. Oh, baby. I hope you're ready to get really practical, get really specific, and really grow as we journey towards life with Jesus. Man, I love you guys, and enjoy the sermon. In Jesus' most famous prayer, he said these words: "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." What does that mean exactly, that God's kingdom would come to earth? Well, in this series entitled Your Kingdom Come, we're taking a very specific look from the words of Jesus at what his kingdom is. This week, we talk about anger. Jesus said in Matthew 5, "But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment." Jesus takes the traditional understanding of actually acting on that anger and says even another step farther. When we have anger inside of us, that is when we're liable to judgment. Now, I don't know about you, but that to me just feels like a really high bar. I mean, what did Jesus mean? That anger is bad? That anytime we rear up in visceral passion, that we're in trouble? Well, first, we've got to look at what is anger anyway. And we're going to start with a look at Webster's dictionary from 1828. Here's what he says anger is: a violent passion of the mind excited by real or supposed injury. Anger is usually accompanied with the propensity to take vengeance or to obtain satisfaction from the offending party. This passion, however, varies in degrees of violence. Varies in degrees. That seems true to me about anger. And again, it makes me ask the question, so what degree of anger is the kind of sin that Jesus is talking about? Well, as I've looked into anger, anger comes from a variety of different places. Anger is a visceral response, meaning it's something that happens not intellectually, but it's usually something that happens passionately. And one thing we know about emotions is that emotions are neutral. They're not good or bad. They are responses. The other thing we know about anger is that it's triggered. What are the things that trigger your anger? I think of natural things like hunger, thirst, lack of sleep, a sloppiness, or it's a biochemical reaction to things like drugs or alcohol. Another thing that could trigger anger is experiences, stress in life, different discontented situations that just cause us to react. Sometimes it's the things that are out of our control that cause us the most tension. Finally, anger can be triggered by people. And usually, the closer we are to someone, the more that anger can be triggered. You know what's interesting is anger is also different by culture. I want to show you a culture map real quick and just show you how different cultures feel about anger. Now, as you look at that, what jumps out to you? I mean, I'll tell you what jumps out to me right away is Israel. And I had the chance to go to Israel, and I remember being kind of astounded by our bus driver or by our tour guide. When they would jump out, somebody would go in front of the bus or be blocking their way, and they'd be leaning out the window, just it just almost seemed like they were cursing at them. I don't know what they were saying because they were not saying it in English. But the point is that based on the culture you live in, even the family that you grow up in, different expressions, varying degrees of anger will be expressed based on how your experience is. And then, of course, anger it varies by personality type. I mean, some people are just fed by anger. Other people, their anger is stuffed until they finally blow. And some people almost seem like they never are angry at all. I mean, I've wondered, are Jesus' words harder to live out for certain personality types? Is Jesus categorizing people based on, well, man, if you were just born without a propensity to anger, you're just better. Sorry. I can't think that that is what Jesus was talking about. And so it comes back again to what kind of anger is he talking about? Well, to look at this, we've got to look at the whole scripture. Let's read it together. Matthew 5:21 through 26 says, "You've heard it said to those of old, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, 'You fool,' will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift before you go to the altar. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly, I say to you, you will never get out until you've paid the last penny." What sticks out to you as I read that about anger? To me, it seems like we're talking more than an emotion, more than a cultural response, more than what fires us up, and if we're the person that gets fired up easily, or if we're cool, calm, and collected. What I see that Jesus is talking about here, he's actually describing the kingdom. He's describing a world where reconciliation and coming together between people is normal. I think the kind of anger that Jesus is talking about is the kind of anger that separates us from people. Let's take a little closer look at a type of anger that Jesus experienced. Now, this comes from Mark 3, verse 5, and this is what it says as Jesus looked at the Pharisees. It says, "He looked around them with anger, grieved at the hardness of heart, and he said to the man," this is the man he was going to heal, "Stretch out your hand." And the man stretched it out, and his hand was restored. I mean, this is interesting. Here Jesus is living in anger towards the Pharisees. But why? Those Pharisees were acting all pious and preventing Jesus from bringing the kingdom to this man with a withered hand. Jesus saw through the heart of the matter, saw that their pious rules and religion was preventing the kingdom from coming. Jesus' anger was not so much with them, but he was angry. He was viscerally responding to the brokenness of our world and the world around us. As we transition here, I want to look a little bit about how anger can be expressed, because this is where we can go wrong with anger. And then I want to paint a picture as we close of what Jesus is saying about the kingdom here. So I used this analogy a few years ago, and it's just rung true to me. Anger works like this. So let's say you have a friend, a brother or a sister, or somebody that you connect with, and they say something that offends you or makes you feel hurt. What we can so easily do, imagine an imaginary brick that we just set down between us. So far that brick doesn't stop us, but it's definitely there. It's starting to create a division between us. And then instead of dealing with that little brick, what happens often is it can simmer. And the next morning we wake up and we feel annoyed with that person, and all of a sudden there's another brick. Later we see that person and we just feel funny to them. All of a sudden it's not this copacetic, we get along, and another brick is placed. Then they say, "You okay?" you're acting kind of weird, and we say, I'm fine. We don't want to bring it up. Another brick is placed. That weekend, you see on Facebook that they went out with some friends and they're enjoying their time and they didn't invite you. And you feel hurt. And you wonder, what kind of person are they anyway? Another brick. Later the next week, you're talking to a friend and it's just bugging you, and you finally bring it up and you gossip about this person saying, I'm not sure what kind of person they really are anyway. 3 more bricks. You get the idea, right? I mean, pretty soon you're saying sarcastic comments, you're avoiding them, you're ignoring their phone calls, and a little thing has been created, this giant wall between you. What's Jesus saying about all this? He's saying, before you do anything religious, you've got to see that the kingdom is a place where walls do not define us. When I've thought about this often, here's one of my phrases in life. Jesus calls us to build bridges and not fences. You ever notice that in America we're constantly building fences around our property because we want our privacy? I've been thinking often that Jesus calls us to tear down those fences. Of course, not necessarily literally, but he teaches us to build bridges to people. And in a world where this anger is driving such division, what would it look like for you and I to live into this kind of kingdom where we're breaking down those walls, breaking down those fences, and we're mending relationships everywhere? This is a hard thing to do. Paul said, and I think he said it well in Ephesians 4, he said, be angry, but do not sin, and do not let the sun go down on your anger. As we close, I want to give you a couple practicals. I think Paul hit it right on the head. I think he understood Jesus' message perfectly. Jesus was not condemning anger. Jesus was condemning the things that separate us as humans. And more than that, he was painting a picture. He was actually describing a world where conflicts would not define relationships. And so today, I'm going to turn it back over to you and ask you this question. Is there a wall that needs to be broken down between someone and you? And this wall could be your own building, and it could be them building. You'll notice in the scripture that when Jesus said, if you're ready to give your gift at the altar and you know that your brother has something against you, I mean, I find this so interesting because usually we think, well, I can only be responsible for what I've done, but Jesus causes an extreme kind of ownership. The kind of ownership where we're emotionally aware enough to recognize when a division is between us and someone else, that we would do anything possible to be brought together. I've got a couple tips. These tips are not from Jesus, they're from me, but they might help you get started in mending these relationships. Here's the first one. Admit your fault. I think just be willing to, even if you would say the majority of the fault is on someone else, right? They did 9, I did 1. Well, then you've got this great opportunity to admit the 1. The second thing is admit you're hurt, which is admit that the fact that these relationship divisions, they hurt you. I mean, I think a lot of times we want to be so tough and like stonewalled that we pretend like we're not hurt or that it doesn't bother us. Recently, I was talking to one of our elders at the Vineyard, and I was expressing something that somebody at the Vineyard had done that hurt me. And I was trying to tell this elder of ours, I was like, but I don't want to let this bother me. I want to just keep being a good pastor. I said something like that. And this elder looked at me in brilliance and said, yeah, but as a pastor, we want you to have a soft heart. You've got to admit that this hurts, DJ. That was so good for me to hear, even though I didn't necessarily want to hear it. Because I did. I had to admit that the tension or the division created hurt me. And then the next thing is admit that you don't understand their side of the story. I mean, this is so powerful. I think it falls under the vein of being curious about people. One thing anger can do is it can put us up on our little high horse where we're pointing fingers and we know we're right. And that can be dangerous. To remain curious is to say, I don't understand why this person might have done this, or what motivated them, or what caused them to live in that way. And that kind of attitude is the start of what brings us together. Finally, I would just say, commit to reconciliation. I mean, if there's anything I see about the kingdom that Jesus is talking about, is he's saying do whatever it takes to make sure that you're reconciled. Man, today, as you've heard this, as you wrestle with your own anger and your own divisions, I invite you to take those risky steps, those bold, faith-filled steps to be reconciled to your brothers and sisters at any cost. God bless you. All right, it's question time. We got a lot to talk about with anger. So here's the first question. How is anger misunderstood in our culture? All right, second question. How do you see the difference between good anger and bad anger? And finally, this is an invitation to share about your journey in anger. So specifically, some questions to help you share a little bit about your anger and how you're processing is these two questions. Where is anger difficult in your journey? And how have you seen anger be used as a weapon for good in your life? God bless you.